Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Today, we're diving into the story of one of the most iconic tank destroyers of the Second World War, the Jagdpanther. The story of this machine begins on August 2nd, 1942. The German command, always seeking an edge, decided that the chassis of the brand-new Panther tank, specifically the VK3002 MAN design, would serve as the ideal foundation for a new heavy tank destroyer. This marked a significant evolution from their earlier, lighter vehicles. The core requirement was simple but ambitious. The new vehicle had to mount the powerful 8.8 cm Sd.Kfz, a gun with a .71 caliber barrel, and feature a heavily armored, well-protected casemate. Interestingly, the initial design work was started by Krupp. They were ahead of the curve, receiving a contract for 3 armored casemates as early as June 29, 1942. By September 9th, they had a preliminary sketch ready for a 35-ton vehicle, with a substantial 80 mm of frontal armor. It was a promising start. However, on October 15th, Minister of Armaments Albert Speer intervened. He decided to transfer the entire project to Daimler-Benz. The reasoning was logical. Krupp was already overloaded with other projects, while Daimler-Benz was preparing for mass production of the Panther tank itself. Since the new destroyer was based on the Panther's chassis, having the same company build it made perfect sense. Daimler-Benz quickly got to work and had a wooden mock-up ready by November 1942. But then, progress stalled. The company became preoccupied with the idea of using the never-produced Panther II chassis. It wasn't until May 1943 that they received a firm order to proceed with the standard Panther I.
The office instructed them to finalize the design and begin hull production by September. But once again, reality intervened. Daimler-Benz was already struggling to meet the demand for Panther tanks and simply lacked the capacity to build an entirely new vehicle. So, on May 24, 1943, the production contract was handed over to MIAG, a manufacturing company based in Braunschweig. Daimler-Benz transferred their final wooden mock-up and all technical documentation to MIAG in June 1943. MIAG then introduced several crucial modifications. They replaced the telescopic sight with a periscopic one, reduced the crew to 5 men by eliminating one loader, and, learning a hard lesson from the Ferdinand's disastrous debut at Kursk, added a hull machine gun for close defense. With these changes, the first prototype was assembled in October 1943. By November, it received its official designation, Panzerjäger Panther für 8.8 cm Pak 43/3, or by its Sd.Kfz 173 index. The world, however, would come to know it simply as the Jagdpanther.
The production plans for the Jagdpanther were nothing short of ambitious.
By the summer of 1944, German High Command expected to roll out 150 of these machines every single month. But, as you might have guessed, that target was never met. MIAG, despite being an experienced manufacturer, struggled to ramp up production from the start. To make matters worse, the Allies had a significant say in the matter. In 1944 alone, Allied bombers hit the MIAG factory in Braunschweig 10 times. The result was a frustratingly slow trickle of vehicles. Just 5 in January 1944, 7 in February, 8 in March, 10 in April, 10 in May, 6 in June, 15 in July, 14 in August, 21 in September, and only 8 in October. It wasn't until November that numbers finally jumped to 55, followed by 67 in December. Production continued into 1945, with 72 built in January, 42 in February, 59 in March, and even 25 in April, as the Reich was collapsing around them. This late surge was partly due to another manufacturer, MNH, joining the effort. In total, including 2 prototypes, approximately 425 Jagdpanthers were built. In a strange postscript to the war, the British even had a dozen more assembled after the surrender, using captured components for trials at Bovington. The vehicle you see in the footage here is one of those very machines. Now, with the history out of the way, let's pop the hood and examine what made the Jagdpanther such a formidable machine. The hull was welded from rolled steel plates, with the seams reinforced for extra structural strength. The armor layout was nearly identical to the Panther tank. The upper front plate was 80 millimeters thick, angled at 55 degrees. The lower front plate was 60 millimeters thick. The sides were 40 millimeters, and the rear was 40 millimeters at a 30-degree angle. The casemate sides were a sloped 50 millimeters. The belly armor varied from 25 millimeters at the front down to 16 millimeters at the rear. The roof of the casemate started at 16 millimeters, but was later increased to 25 millimeters on later models. While 80 millimeters might sound modest compared to the Jagdtiger's massive 250 millimeters of frontal armor, it's important to remember that the steep angle of the Panther's front plate made it highly effective. Frontline troops had few complaints about their protection. Inside, the layout was familiar to anyone who knew a Panther. Up front, the transmission was mounted in the center with the driver to its left. He steered using levers that engaged the brakes, and he had a manual gear shift and handbrake to his right. His instrument panel included a tachometer, oil pressure gauge, speedometer, compass, and even a clock. He observed the battlefield through 2 vision ports. To the right of the transmission sat the radio operator. His primary equipment was the FUG-5 radio, which had a range of about 6.4 kilometers on voice and 9.4 kilometers on Morse code. Command vehicles were equipped with a more powerful FUG-8, identifiable by its star antenna. The radio operator also had the critical task of keeping enemy infantry at bay, manning the hull-mounted MG-34 machine gun. Its ammunition was stored in 8 bags on the right side of the hull.
Moving back from the radio operator's station, we enter the heart of the vehicle, the fighting compartment. Here, in the center, sat the massive breech of the 8.8 centimeter PaK 43/3L/71. The gunner was positioned to the left of the breech. Within his reach were the ready racks for the 88mm rounds, the controls for the smoke mortar, and the mechanisms for laying the gun. To the right of the gun sat the commander. His role was to scan the battlefield through his periscope, identify targets, and direct the crew. Behind the commander was the loader, whose physically demanding job was, quite simply, loading that massive gun as quickly and efficiently as possible. Crew entry and exit were through 2 round hatches in the casemate roof. There was also a large rectangular hatch in the rear wall of the casemate, a very practical feature used for loading ammunition, ejecting spent shell casings, and even removing the entire gun for major maintenance. Early prototypes had pistol ports in the hull sides for self-defense, but these were wisely deleted on production models. Move to the rear of the vehicle, and it's pure Panther. The engine was the familiar Maybach HL230P30, a 700 horsepower V12 gasoline engine. For a vehicle weighing in at 45.5 tons, it provided adequate performance. On a road, the Jagdpanther could reach a top speed of about 46 kilometers per hour, 28 miles per hour. Cross-country, of course, it was significantly slower. 6 fuel tanks held a total of 720 liters, about 190 gallons, giving it a road range of approximately 250 kilometers, 155 miles. Now, let's talk about the main event, the gun. The 8.8 centimeter Pak 43/3L/71 was a true masterpiece of engineering. The barrel alone was over 6.3 meters, 20 feet, long.
It could traverse 13 degrees to the left or right and elevate from -8 to +14 degrees. The semi-automatic breech and electric firing mechanism allowed for a relatively fast rate of fire, and the performance? The PZGR-39/1 armor-piercing round, weighing 10.2 kilograms, 22.5 pounds, could punch through 165 millimeters, 6.5 inches of armor at a distance of 1,000 meters, 1,100 yards. This was the same formidable gun found on the King Tiger, the Ferdinand, and the Nashorn. The Jagdpanther carried 57 rounds stowed on the floor and along the sides of the hull. The gunner initially used an SFL ZF-5 periscopic sight with 3 times magnification, which was later upgraded to the WZF 1/4 telescopic sight with a much more powerful 10 times zoom. The suspension was identical to the Panther, featuring torsion bars and the characteristic interleaved road wheel system. The drive sprocket was at the front, and the idler wheel with track tensioner was at the rear. The tracks were 66 centimeters, 26 inches wide, with 86 to 87 links per side. Of course, the Jagdpanther evolved during its short production life. The useless pistol ports were the first to go. In April 1944, they switched to a 2-part barrel for easier manufacturing. The 15-ton Jack was replaced by a 20-ton version. In June, the driver lost his second vision port. Starting in July, the gun mantlet was bolted rather than welded, and the roof armor was increased to 25 millimeters. The exhaust system was also modified. Vehicles produced after these changes are sometimes informally referred to as Ausf G1. In August 1944, the gun mantlet received a small cast chin to help deflect shots, and the exhaust pipes got protective covers. By the end of 1944, they even stopped painting the interior to save time, and the suspension was simplified.
Now, for the part you've all been waiting for. How did the Jagdpanther actually perform in combat? The first unit to receive them was the 654th Heavy Tank Destroyer Battalion. Yes, the same unit that had used the Ferdinand at Kursk. They handed their remaining Ferdinands over to the 653rd Battalion and shipped back to Germany to refit. But since Jagdpanther production was painfully slow, they initially had to train on Bergepanther recovery vehicles. They finally got their first 2 Jagdpanthers in March 1944, but these were used as trainers. It wasn't until April 28th that the battalion received its first 8 combat-ready vehicles. After the D-Day landings, the 654th was rushed to the front. By June 27th, they were under the command of the 47th Panzer Corps, fighting the British in Normandy. The fighting was intense. On July 30th, they reported knocking out 10 British tanks. In one famous engagement, just 3 Jagdpanthers ran into a squadron of Churchill tanks from the 6th Guards Tank Brigade. In a matter of minutes, they destroyed 11 British tanks. They were forced to pull back after 2 of them were damaged. One had its track blown off, but the score was heavily in their favor. By August 1st, they had 8 runners. They received 8 more on August 16th, but the brutal fighting in August cost them 17 Jagdpanthers. On September 9th, the battered battalion was pulled back to Germany to refit. They returned to the Western Front in late November. Between November 20th and 30th, they were in near constant combat, claiming 52 Allied tanks and 10 anti-tank guns for the loss of 18 of their own vehicles. The 559th Tank Destroyer Battalion was next in line. After losing their last martyrs on the Eastern Front in February 1944,
They were sent to Millau to re-equip with Jagdpanthers in March. But again, there simply weren't enough to go around. In August, they received 28 Stug-3s to fill the gap. On September 3rd, this mixed unit was thrown into the fighting on the Western Front. They were hastily trained and poorly prepared. By September 29th, they were down to just 9 Jagdpanthers and 8 Stugs. By November, they had 6 Jagdpanthers and 15 Stugs, of which only 3 were operational. The 519th Heavy Tank Destroyer Battalion met a similar fate. Wiped out in Belarus in the summer of 1944, they were sent to Millau to rebuild. They received 17 Jagdpanthers and 28 Stug-3s. They were sent to the Western Front on October 8th, but by December, they too were down to just 3 operational Jagdpanthers. For the planned Ardennes offensive, 2 more battalions, the 561st and 655th, were formed. They received a mix of Jagdpanthers and PZ-4/70 tank destroyers, but the Jagdpanthers trickled in too slowly. When the offensive kicked off on December 16th, only 17 out of 56 available Jagdpanthers were actually ready to move. The rest were broken down. On the Eastern Front, Jagdpanthers didn't appear until January 1945, with about 38 vehicles sent to the 563rd and 616th Battalions. In the final months of the war, many Jagdpanthers weren't even issued to dedicated tank destroyer units. They were simply used as replacements for tank losses in panzer divisions like the 2nd, 9th SS Hohenstaufen, and 10th SS Funsberg. Spreading them out like this diluted their impact. In the end, the Jagdpanther stands as, arguably, the most well-balanced heavy tank destroyer of the war.
It had the excellent armor of the Panther, the incredible gun of the King Tiger, and the same decent mobility as the Panther. It could engage and destroy any Allied tank from beyond their effective range. Yes, it had its reliability issues, but they weren't as crippling as those of the Jagdtiger or even the King Tiger. But it was a case of too little, too late. By the time it was ready, Germany was on its knees. Only around 400 were built. By April 10, 1945, only 53 were still listed on the books, and of those, just 16 were combat-ready. Interestingly, the Jagdpanther's story didn't end in 1945. The French army operated a few captured vehicles for a short time after the war. That's it for the Jagdpanther. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give it a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're feeling generous, subscribe and share this video. This has been Starshina.